One time I went to the bar with one of my friends. I had just turned 21, so I hadn't been to many bars up to that point. My friend was drinking on the way to the bar, so he was already pretty drunk when we got there. When I sat at the bar, a cute girl came and talked to me and my friend. She said her name was Candace, and I noticed she had really bright red hair. I assumed she dyed it. It was pretty, but unnatural. Anyway, this girl was flirting with me and my friend. She could tell my friend was already very drunk. To be honest, I played along like I was drunk already too, since it seemed to be working for my friend. I didn't know if she was just trying to get free drinks, so I told her we didn't have much money. She offered to buy us drinks. She kept buying us drinks and I started to get confused as to who she liked between me and my friend. My friend went to the bathroom. Before he came back, he was kicked out by the bouncers. He was too drunk. Candace and I went outside with him. She kept telling him to go home with her. He was so out of it he could barely answer her. I told her he was too drunk and that I couldn't let him go anywhere. I didn't want him to wake up hungover in some random house with no car and no idea what happened. Candace kept pushing it, saying that she would take care of him, but I told her no because I had to stay with him. I was more sober than him, and he was my responsibility. I told her the only way he was going anywhere was if I tagged along. I assumed she thought that I was jealous or cock-blocking, but my friend could barely stand and had lost interest in Candace already at that point. She immediately started flirting with me and offered to get my friend a taxi to drive him home and said we could go to her place alone. At this point I had a few drinks, and I was pretty buzzed, so I agreed. We took my friend to the taxi and walked to her car. I slightly stumbled on the way to her car.
Wow, you're pretty drunk, huh?
She said, smiling as she held onto my arm. Yeah, I said. I don't know why, but I just felt slightly shy and anxious. Everything was just happening too easily for me, so I felt uneasy. We got in her car and drove down the street.
Want to stop at the liquor store and get some more to drink? I'll buy it, so don't worry about paying.
She offered. I didn't want to drink any more than I already did. I was already buzzed and wanted to be able to carry myself throughout the rest of the night. Sometimes I made myself look stupid when I was drunk, so I didn't want to ruin anything with Candace more than I already did earlier by telling her my friend was too drunk. I told her I was already drunk enough, but she insisted. I didn't want to seem lame, so I told her to get me a pint of liquor with some apple juice to chase it. She went in the store and came out with a lot more than just a pint. I assumed she wanted to drink more also, and that's why she got a fifth instead of a pint. On the car ride, we passed the bottle back and forth, but she took tiny sips. I tried to take tiny sips, but she kept passing me the bottle and telling me to drink. I somehow managed to drink all of my apple juice and pretend to drink the bottle by spitting the liquor in the apple juice bottle. I tossed the apple juice bottle full of liquor out the window before she saw it. I didn't want her to know I was acting drunker than I was. She actually believed I was sloppy drunk when I was simply buzzed. I took a couple more sips of liquor and finished the bottle. Throughout the car ride, I called her the wrong name a couple of times to get a reaction out of her. She didn't react to it. She just kept letting me call her Carla without correcting me. For some reason, I thought she lied to me about her name initially. We drove up to her house. I pretended to trip and stumble into her front door. She helped me walk inside by holding me up. She opened her front door, which was unlocked. We walked in her house. She closed her front door and then locked it. I thought that was strange, but I assumed she didn't want anyone walking in on us. I told her that I had to use the bathroom. I walked into her bathroom, locked the door, and looked in the mirror. I just felt strange. I felt like something was off. I felt myself becoming more drunk from finishing the bottle earlier. I turned on the sink to make noise and made myself puke up the liquor I drank. I flushed and went to the sink and started drinking the tap water out of my hands to sober up. I just didn't want to be drunk, but I still wanted to hook up with Candace, so I wanted to pretend to be drunk. I turned the sink off and I could hear her talking to someone.
He's drunk as hell. He can barely stand. Do it.
Who was she talking to? And do what? I walked out of the bathroom and into the living room. The moment I stepped into the living room, I saw her walking into another room. All I could see was the back of her head, that strange, very bright red hair go into another room. I didn't see her face or anything. I just saw her kinda walk fast into the room. The living room was pretty dark. "Hey, where are you going?" I slurred like I was drunk. She walked back into the dark living room and up to me.
"Let's go in my room,"
she said. I looked at her bright red hair and then into her eyes. They were different. Her face was different. It was another girl with the same hair. That's when I realized. It was another girl with the same wig on. It was a wig the whole time. She had changed it with the girl from earlier for whatever reason. My heart felt like it stopped, but I tried to look like I had no idea it was a different girl. I kind of smiled at her and told her I just needed to use the bathroom one more time and told her sorry. I was so drunk. She said,
"It's fine, just hurry up in there."
I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I heard her whisper something to someone again. This time I think I heard a male voice whisper back. I honestly didn't concentrate on listening to exactly what she said. Something sketchy was going on and I had to get out of that house. I opened the bathroom window and jumped straight out of it and ran faster than I have ever run in my life. I didn't look behind myself or anything. I just ran through the backyard, jumped the fence, ran through someone else's backyard, hit a road, and ran toward the main road. I kept running down the main road until I saw a 24-hour convenience store. I ran into the store and stood straight at the front of the store in front of the camera. I called a taxi and went home. I try to think what happened that night. What were she, or they, planning that night? Why did she tell me a fake name? Why was she trying to get my friend and I so drunk? I thought maybe a robbery, but she kept spending money on us. She kept buying us drinks and even paid for my friend's taxi cab. And mostly, why did she wear a wig that she gave to another girl to wear? Who was she talking to? What did it mean? And what was in that room they tried to lure me into? The next day after this incident, I went back to the house with a couple of friends to see just what was going on. Nobody was there. No cars, no people, nothing. Just an empty house. I ended up finding out that the house was a summer rental, and whoever those people were, they broke into that house and used it for only that night and never came back. This was a few years back in 2017. I was 19 at the time and back home from college one summer. I met this girl, Vanessa, on Tinder, and as you do on a typical summer fling, we spent a large part of our time looking for new parking lots in which to do the deed with relative privacy. Our go-to spot was a pretty empty 3-story parking garage at the nearby community college. The first floor typically had people milling about by their cars, but the second 2 floors were usually pretty quiet and an ideal spot for 2 college kids to kill some time. One day on a pretty normal afternoon, we decide to head to the parking lot in Vanessa's Honda that she affectionately referred to as the Shaggin' Wagon, due to its ample space. We pull into the first floor of the parking garage, which was filled with parked cars and a few people walking about. Normally, I don't pay attention to the people on the first floor, and as we were driving through to the second floor ramp, a stocky bald man with a stern face who looked around 40 happened to exchange a glance with me as we passed him. The dude was wearing a pink polo and was walking, presumably to his car, so naturally I paid him no mind. We eventually get to the second floor and find a nice empty area at the far end of the structure. To the right of it, beside the car, was a small pillar, which was a helpful obstruction in case cops drive by. Now the day was young, so we decided we wouldn't jump right into the sex, and instead hopped into the back seat of the car to just hang out and banter. She pulls out a little thing of vodka, and we were playing a light drinking game. Usually I like to scope around at this time to make sure we were in a private area, and yeah, it was pretty solid. We were smack in the middle of the end lot. The left of the lot was empty, and to the right was a blue sedan parked at the edge a good 50 feet away from us. I knew we were in for a good time. 15 minutes pass and I noticed the bald man from before walking to the sedan from the corner stairs. He was clearly the owner of the car and was going to leave, which was good news for us. But something kind of threw me off. I noticed that he walked up to the car but didn't get in. Instead, he walked to the front of the car and was looking at its hood. I guess he was taking his time. Whatever. I focused back on our drinking game, which was a fun mix of truth or dare and shots. I was feeling good and we were having a pretty chill time. 10 minutes pass and I noticed the bald man walking away from the car back to the stairs. Guess he wasn't leaving? Might have just grabbed something from his car, I figured. Not 5 minutes later did something happen that kind of got my guard up. Up that same staircase came a dad and his kid. Like I said, the only car other than us on this side of the floor was that sedan to the right. And of course, they walked directly towards it, hopped in, and pulled out. So the car clearly didn't belong to the bald guy. I explained what I saw to Vanessa and we agreed it might have been some guy trying to break into the car for petty theft. And unfortunately, seeing as we were there for pretty illegal reasons and a little tipsy, there wasn't much we could do about it. Regardless, at this point we were both pretty ready to do what we were there for, so we pulled off most of our clothes and went at it. At some point along the fun, I was on top of her, and the windows were fogging up a bit. Being on top meant I was responsible for keeping an eye out for cops, or very annoyingly law-abiding citizens who have a problem with young people getting it on in a parking lot. So on top, I decide to look through the foggy rear to the end of the parking lot. As I said before, it was basically barren with maybe a car or two parked at the opposite end of the lot hundreds of feet away, and definitely no sign of cops. It was like 2 p.m. on a Saturday, and we had more than enough time to react if we did see a cop. I looked to the right end of the lot, previously my left, and still no cars. It was totally empty and with ample space between us and the edge of the lot. Even better, I looked to the left past the pillar and remembered that the sedan had pulled out earlier, so we were totally in the clear. We were alone. I looked back down at her, clearly enjoying herself, and then I realized something that made my heart sink. In the moment, I had chalked it up to my imagination, but I thought I could have sworn that behind the pillar to my left, which, mind you, if the window were open, my outstretched hand could have comfortably rested on it, I saw a single eye peering around the edge. Taking a deep breath, I slowly turned my head to look to my left, and sure as hell, there it was, the side of a man's face, a single wide eye staring directly into mine as I lay almost fully naked on top of my girl in the world's most compromising position. I could tell he was crouched behind the pillar, but all I could make out was his face. It was so close that I could make out subtle facial features like the cold blue in his wide, menacingly focused eye, and his bald head. The man notices me and pulls his head back behind the pillar, and I realize we don't have much time. I had no idea what his intentions were, and we were in no place to get help in this completely empty lot. I was faced with the really awkward task of quickly informing Vanessa, since she had the keys. So I leaned down to tell her the news. Don't freak out, but someone is watching us. We need to leave. Now. She freezes, looks at me for a moment, and with incredible speed hops into the driver's seat, barely covering herself, and pulls out as fast as she can. As we drive off, I look back and see the bald man in his pink polo, casually strolling away from the pillar, holding what looked like a phone in his right hand. Needless to say, we never went back to that lot again, and the rest of that bright summer day was pretty tense. It occurred to us that the man was probably loitering in the parking lot for a while, waiting to prey on teens looking for a private spot to do the deed, and identified that day's victims when we made eye contact. What made it worse was he must have been hiding behind that poor dad's car for an entire 10 minutes, waiting till we were vulnerable so he could strike. So creepy parking lot peeper, I don't know if you were trying to rub one out, collect new footage, or break into the car for a very unwelcome threesome, but Jesus, dude. I had been exchanging messages with Alex for several weeks on an online dating app. His texts were clever, filled with humor, and his profile picture featured a smile that seemed genuine and inviting. I was thrilled when we decided to meet in person. We agreed on a cozy, dimly lit cafe downtown, a place that felt both intimate and relaxed. From the moment Alex greeted me with a warm hug, I was at ease. His charm was apparent as he complimented my outfit and engaged me in a captivating conversation. We laughed over coffee, discovering shared interests in literature and film. The evening felt magical, and when Alex suggested a walk through a nearby wooded park to continue our date, I eagerly agreed. The park was serene under the night sky, with soft pools of light cast by street lamps. As we strolled along a winding path, Alex proposed a shortcut through a quieter section of the park. I felt a shiver of unease at the dense darkness ahead, but Alex's enthusiasm was infectious. He spoke with such excitement about exploring this hidden part of the park that I reluctantly agreed. The shortcut was narrow and overgrown, with shadows encroaching upon us. Alex's flashlight cut through the darkness as he led the way, his voice brimming with excitement about his latest discovery. The path felt increasingly claustrophobic as we ventured deeper, and I struggled to ignore the growing sense of discomfort gnawing at me. We soon arrived at an old, abandoned house, nearly swallowed by the surrounding trees. Its windows were shattered, and the door hung loosely on its hinges. Alex's eyes lit up with an adventurous gleam. "I've always wanted to explore this place," he said. "I've heard it has some fascinating history." Despite the cold dread creeping down my spine, I followed him inside. The house was a relic of the past, shrouded in dust and cobwebs. The air was heavy with the smell of mildew, and the darkness inside seemed almost tangible. Alex's excitement was palpable, but I found myself increasingly uneasy as we navigated the musty rooms. As we ventured further, Alex's demeanor began to shift. His earlier enthusiasm faded, replaced by a nervous energy. He glanced around with increasing apprehension, and I noticed a subtle tension in his movements. When we reached a room at the back of the house, Alex set down a small lantern and pointed to a disturbing setup on the floor. Candles were arranged in a circle, and strange symbols were drawn in chalk. My heart raced as I took in the eerie scene. "Alex, what is this?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Alex's face paled. "It's nothing," he said quickly. "We should go." Before I could react, I heard faint noises, muffled voices and footsteps echoing from somewhere deeper in the house. My pulse quickened, and I grabbed Alex's arm. "Do you hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Alex's anxiety became palpable. "We need to leave." "Now," he urged, his grip on my arm firm as he pulled me toward the door. As we hurried back, the noises grew louder and more distinct. The footsteps seemed to follow us, and the muffled voices became clearer, though still unintelligible. Alex's face was etched with fear, and I could feel his hand shaking in mine. Just as we reached the front door, a shadowy figure appeared in the dim light of the lantern. The figure moved swiftly toward us, and I could hear the rapid approach of footsteps. Panic surged through me. Alex's face was a mixture of fear and regret. "I'm sorry, Lena. I didn't mean for this," he said, his voice cracking. I didn't wait for further explanation. Adrenaline took over as I wrenched free from Alex's grasp and bolted through the house. The darkness seemed to close in around me, and the sounds of pursuit grew louder. My breaths came in ragged gasps as I raced down the overgrown path, my fear propelling me forward. Finally, I burst onto the main road, where a passing car screeched to a halt. The driver, alarmed by my terrified state, quickly helped me into the vehicle and sped away from the nightmare. When I reported the incident to the police, they found the abandoned house but no sign of Alex or anyone else. The house was a known spot for urban explorers, and they found no evidence of the other people or noises I had heard. The only clue left behind was the small lantern Alex had carried, adding to the mystery of what had transpired. I never heard from Alex again. The memory of that night lingered, a chilling reminder of how quickly a seemingly perfect date can devolve into a terrifying ordeal. The unanswered questions and the haunting echoes of that night stayed with me, a shadow that never quite faded.